"Hey, security doesn't belong behind the product booth, step out now." The words didn't slip. They landed hard. A tech rep in a cobalt blazer barked across the floor of the innovation hall, his voice slicing through ambient jazz and AI demos like a dropped glass on marble. Heads turned. Darius King didn't. He stood still tall, silent, in a fitted black polo and slate gray chinos, hands behind his back. Calm, grounded. He wasn't wearing a staff badge. He wasn't holding a tablet. He wasn't moving. And that, apparently, was enough to be a threat. The man stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "Sir, are you with event security or just standing around?" He glanced at Darius' shoes, then his skin. "Because either way, you're out of place." Darius didn't respond. He'd seen this play before. At 24, when AVC asked if he was with catering. At 27, when a security guard assumed he was delivering gear. At 30, when he tried to enter a boardroom and someone said, "Sorry, executives only." But today, he wasn't in the wrong place. They were just in the dark. Before we go deeper, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe power doesn't always need a suit or a spotlight, like and subscribe. These stories don't just go viral, they shift perception. Now back to Darius. He was standing inside booth 3-1 to be at the Tech Expo, one of the most prestigious innovation summits in the country. The AI display next to him flickered quietly. Neuromindos, adaptive intelligence, powered by D-King systems. Only one person in the crowd noticed, a young intern. She froze, mid-step, mouth half open. But the Tech manager didn't. He turned to a second rep and scoffed. "Why is security standing near the device interface? Someone move him, now." The second man, younger, cockier, laughed. He probably just wanted to look important. Some folks need the illusion. The phrase "some folks" didn't go unnoticed. Darius blinked once. Not out of offense, out of memory. Then the clipboard dropped. "Okay, that's it," the first rep snapped. "I don't care what you think you're doing. You're not cleared. Step aside or I'll call venue security myself." Still, Darius said nothing. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for ID. He just watched them like a teacher watch his students guess wrong, again and again. Because what they didn't know was that in less than 5 minutes, the man they were trying to eject would cancel their $12 million deal with a single phone call. Darius King hadn't walked into the Tech Expo to be seen. He'd walked in to observe. No press, no assistant, no keynote badge with founder in bold font. Just him, low profile, deliberate, like he always did before a major deal closed. Because this morning wasn't about fanfare. It was a test. The Tech Neuromind partnership was supposed to be a game changer. $12 million in custom integration, 5 cities, 3 years of biometric AI rollout. But something in the last few meetings hadn't sat right with Darius. Their tone, their deflections, the way they treated his junior engineers on call, speaking over them, second-guessing every spec. So he came here, alone, to watch. And now, he was watching them fail, publicly, spectacularly. Across the floor, neon blue banners read, "Welcome to the future of intelligence." But the booth he stood in, booth 3-1 to be, looked like the past dressed up in tech. 3 Tech managers, all white, all loud, and none of them realized the AI running their showcase the heartbeat of the product, bore the architecture of the man they were trying to dismiss. A few feet away, the intern was still frozen. Her name was Annika. She was 22, on her second day as a data modeling assistant, and in her hand, a clipboard trembled slightly as she stared at the screen behind Darius. Neuromindos, adaptive intelligence, powered by D-King systems. Her eyes flicked between the screen and the tall man in the black polo. She knew the founder's name. She watched his TED Talk 2 months ago. She just hadn't expected him to be standing here, like this. Her lips parted, unsure if she should say something. But she didn't. Not yet. Meanwhile, one of the Tech reps, the cockier one, leaned into Darius's personal space. "Do you want me to get someone? Or are you gonna move?" He grinned like he'd won something. Like forcing compliance was a game. Darius finally turned his head, just slightly, and looked the man in the eye. You seem invested in moving people who aren't in your way. The rep blinked, caught off guard. Then another voice cut in sharp, higher, female. Excuse me, is there a problem here? It came from a passing exec blonde bob. Designer heels, clearly someone important to them. One of the IonTech guys turned to her quickly. We've got someone impersonating staff, probably security, hanging too close to proprietary equipment. The exec looked at Darius. She didn't say anything. She just gave him the once-over. Shoes, shirt, skin. Then she nodded, slowly. Handle it discreetly. That was the moment Darius felt something shift. Not in the air in himself. Because 10 years ago, he might have let it slide. 3 years ago, he might have walked away. But today, not a chance. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone. No password, no face ID. Just one tap. One name. Eva. The line picked up instantly. A calm voice came through his wireless earpiece. Yes, Mr. King. Darius spoke without turning. Mark the timestamp. Initiate passive protocol. If they escalate, I want eyes on the floor feed. Eva didn't hesitate. Understood. Protocol 3 activated. I'm watching. Back at the booth, the rep smirked. Calling back up. What are you? Freelance. Don't get cute. Darius didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because just then, across the aisle, a woman with a camera slung around her shoulder whispered to her colleague. That's Darius King. He raised his chin slightly, not to confirm, but to let silence finish the sentence. And from that moment on, everything they thought they knew was already unraveling. I'm not going to ask again. Step out of the booth or I'll escalate this. The IonTech rep's voice had lost its smirk. Now it sounded like a man dressed in desperation. He wasn't trying to de-escalate, he was trying to perform. For his team, for the executives nearby, for the hierarchy he thought he understood. But the man in front of him wasn't a threat. He was the architect. Darius didn't budge. He didn't argue. He didn't look around for backup. He simply placed both hands in his pockets and shifted his stance, slowly. Not passive, not aggressive, just centered. And for some reason, that stillness, the complete lack of concern, unnerved the room more than yelling ever could. The event coordinator reappeared, flanked now by a second staffer in a headset. They whispered to each other, glancing at Darius. Clipboard guy's voice dropped into a hiss. If he's not staff, we can call Expo Ops and have him flagged. Flagged? Like a security risk. The second staffer, younger, nervous, asked quietly. Did he actually do anything? Clipboard guy didn't answer. He just nodded toward a nearby security post. That was all it took. One whisper, one assumption, and a man became a problem. Meanwhile, the IonTech display continued its loop on the curved LED screen. Neuromindos adaptive intelligence for real-time decisioning, trusted by cities, deployed by innovators. A few attendees stopped to watch. A couple of them even pulled out their phones, because while the staff tried to make a man disappear, the system he built was glowing behind them like prophecy. Sir, a new voice, firmly authoritative. Security. A uniformed man stood just behind Darius now, hand resting gently near his belt. His tone wasn't angry, it was procedural. We've been asked to verify your credentials. Darius slowly turned his head. By whom? Security motioned toward the IonTech team. There's been a concern about unauthorized presence in the booth area. Could I see a badge or ID? Darius didn't reach for anything. Instead, he asked a question. Do you verify every attendee wearing a black shirt and no lanyard? The guard hesitated. Sir, this is just about access protocol. Or perception, Darius replied quietly. Which one are we following today? The room shifted again. A few more cameras were now up. A few murmurs. Not loud but building. Annika, the intern, stepped forward half a pace. She opened her mouth and closed it. The clipboard in her hands now clutched like a shield. The IonTech rep doubled down. Look, this isn't complicated. He's clearly not part of our staff. We don't know who he is. and he is too close to proprietary hardware. Darius blinked once. His gaze swept the room. Then he spoke, not loud, not dramatic, just calm. You're right. You don't know who I am. He turned to security. But you're about to. He tapped his earpiece again. Eva. Her voice came through instantly. Yes, Mr. King. Proceed to Protocol 6. Suspend IonTech integration across all nodes. Flag client tier and freeze communications. There was a pause, then a precise, surgical response. Confirmed. Integration suspended. Flag active. Comms frozen. Logged and timestamped. Security blinked. The IonTech team froze. One of them, the female executive from earlier, finally spoke, voice tight. Wait, what did you just say? Darius turned to her, polite but unblinking. You'll receive the termination notice within the hour, along with a compliance review report, retroactive to last quarter. The LED display behind him flickered slightly, a connection reset. Then black. Silence. Then Annika spoke, soft but sharp enough to cut the air. I knew it. He's the founder. That's Darius King. And with that, everything that came before was officially irrelevant. Silence. Not the kind that follows a mic drop, but the kind that comes before a verdict. The IonTech booth, once buzzing with demo chatter and sponsor talk, now felt like a courtroom holding its breath. The LED display behind Darius, just moments ago pulsing with his technology, now glowed blank. A soft reboot hum lingered like an accusation. And yet, he still hadn't raised his voice. He stood where he had always stood, in the center of the booth. Same posture, same quiet command. But everything around him had changed. The security guard stepped back, uncertain now, his hand lowered from his belt. Mr. King. He didn't finish the sentence, because names carried weight, and now the room knew his. The female IonTech executive Verity Willis, VP of Strategic Partnerships, to step forward. Mr. King, if this is a misunderstanding, I'm sure we can clarify. Perhaps we schedule a conversation post-expo. There's no need to disrupt the display. Her tone was polished, peer-wrapped, but her eyes flickered, unsure if this was salvageable or fatal. Darius didn't look at her. He looked at Annika. You knew who I was. She nodded slowly, caught but not ashamed. Yes, sir. I recognized the interface and the name on the OS. A pause. Why didn't you say something? Annika swallowed. Because I've seen what happens when interns correct executives. I needed to be sure. He gave her the faintest nod, not praise, not disappointment, just understanding. Across the booth, the younger IonTech rep, the one who smirked first, was no longer smiling. His face had drained, palms now stiff at his sides. He whispered to Marcy, do you think we're still good for the rollout next month? Marcy didn't respond, because she couldn't. Someone in the crowd, a middle-aged black woman with a press badge, raised her phone and started recording. Not in secret, openly, steadily. And Darius didn't stop her, because when truth walks into the room, it doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs to be seen. Darius turned slightly, not to leave, just to survey. I came here to observe, he said evenly, to see how a team I'm funding interacts with unfamiliar presence, unlabeled power. Marcy's face paled. We were told you'd be arriving tomorrow for the keynote. Exactly. His voice cut, clean and quiet. So if I had shown up with cameras and applause, would you have treated me differently? No one answered, because the answer was obvious. The screen behind him flickered back to life, but not with the IonTech demo. Now it showed a looping statement, white on black. Access denied, integration suspended. Please contact Neuromind Compliance. The room let out a collective inhale. Darius's phone buzzed once. Eva again. Update. Legal has received footage from on-site observers. The stream has 11,000 views and rising. Do you wish to proceed with full termination notice? He tapped the mic. Yes. Effective immediately. Remove IonTech from all deployment protocols. Pull access to Neuromind API. He paused and flagged their leadership profiles under tier for review. I want every executive interaction from the last 6 months surfaced. Done. Eva replied, time-stamped and archived. And still, He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't taken a single step forward. The storm didn't come with thunder. It came with restraint, and that's what scared them most. Then, from the crowd, a voice rose, a young black man, attendee badge around his neck. Yo, he didn't even yell, and he just wiped their whole partnership. Someone beside him whispered, "He is the partnership." Marcy tried once more. "Mr. King, we regret how this was handled." He cut her off without looking. "No, you regret being seen." A hush fell again. He turned his head toward the crowd. "This isn't the first time I've been mistaken for staff, for security, for a guest in my own build. But it might be the last time I let it slide." A few claps. Not many. Not yet. But the shift had started. Darius nodded once toward the screen, then toward Annika. "Let your voice be the next line of code, not their version, yours." And just like that, the man they tried to push out had already rewritten the rules of the room. For a moment, no one moved. The crowd around booth 3-1 had grown dense, not loud, not unruly, just still, like a gathering around truth. Phones were out, eyes were locked, and the question hovering in the air was no longer who is he. It was why didn't they see him? And then, someone stepped forward. An older white man in a light gray suit, laminated VIP sponsor badge hanging crooked across his chest. His hair was thinning. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "I saw the whole thing." He turned to the Iontech team. He didn't touch a single thing. Didn't speak, just stood there. "And you all spiraled." The younger rep opened his mouth. The man held up a hand. "No, I've worked with Darius' systems that owe us behind you. It's not just tech, it's legacy. And you treated him like a threat because he didn't wear your costume of belonging." A murmur rippled through the space. Then another voice, this time from a woman mid-30s, South Asian, staff badge clipped tight to her belt. "This happens all the time." She stepped forward, not just to Darius, to any of us who don't walk in with a visible title. "I've been mistaken for catering, for janitorial, and I'm a lead engineer at Chirotech." Her voice cracked slightly but didn't waver. "The problem isn't who he is. The problem is what you assumed he wasn't." Marcy Willis folded her arms tight across her chest. Defensiveness masked as professionalism. "Let's be careful not to escalate." "It's already escalated," Annika cut in. Everyone turned. The intern no longer looked hesitant. Her shoulders were squared now, her clipboard gone. "I saw the way they looked at him. I saw how fast they decided he didn't belong." She looked directly at the crowd. "And I stayed quiet. But I won't do that again." Darius met her eyes. He didn't smile, but something settled between them. A kind of mutual clarity. Then came the ripple. Other voices. Other truths. A black woman in a green blazer. "I was followed in the networking lounge last year. Same assumption that I wasn't supposed to be near investors." A young Latino man, holding a laptop bag. "I've been stopped 3 times today for not wearing a full suit, but I'm a speaker. Check the schedule." A tall Asian American developer. "They told me to step away from the real devs at the last expo. I was the dev." Each story hit like a code being decrypted. This wasn't about one man. This was about a culture that needed confrontation. Darius listened, silently still. But now, the room was speaking for him, or rather speaking for itself. Security had stepped back entirely. Iontech's booth staff had started to melt into the background. And Marcy? She was staring at her tablet like it could undo what had just happened. Then, from the far corner, a woman began recording, not surreptitiously openly. She was from Tech Justice, a small but rising media collective. She held her phone high and said clearly, "This is what happens when silent power becomes seen. And this is what it looks like when people stop swallowing their stories." Darius finally spoke again. "I'm not here to be an example. I'm here because I've spent my life building systems that see what people overlook." He turned slowly, looking at every face in the circle. But even the best tech can't fix what the room refuses to confront. Then he paused, looked at Annika, at the sponsor, at the engineer from Chirotech, at every person who had stepped forward, Not because it was safe, but because it was right. You just made the invisible visible. And that's how the reset begins. And in that moment, the expo didn't belong to Ion Tech anymore. It belonged to the voices they tried to ignore. You just killed the deal, Marcy hissed. Her voice was low, teeth clenched not for Darius, but for the crowd. It wasn't a whisper of regret. It was a threat wrapped in blame. The kind of sentence that gets thrown around when power starts slipping, and someone desperately tries to catch it before it hits the floor. Do you have any idea how much this rollout meant? Darius didn't even turn. He simply replied, still facing the people who had just spoken. More than how people are treated in your name. Marcy stepped closer, trying to lower the conversation as if pretending would reset the moment. Mr. King, I don't know what they told you, but this situation got misunderstood. We've had staffing issues today. The misunderstanding, Darius interrupted, was thinking I wouldn't notice. He faced her now. It wasn't just the assumption. It was the certainty, the speed, the choreography of dismissal. Behind her, the younger rep, the one who laughed earlier, muttered too loud, "This is political theater." The phrase snapped the room back into full tension. A man in the crowd shouted, "This isn't theater. This is how you always act when no one's filming." Another added, "Not anymore." Then came the internal collapse. The Ion Tech lead engineer, a black woman in her 40s, with systems architect on her badge, walked out from behind the booth. She didn't say anything at first. She just removed her lanyard and placed it on the corner of the table. Then she looked at Darius. "I tried to warn them about the culture, about what we were becoming." Her voice cracked, but she didn't flinch. They didn't listen. Darius nodded once. Respectful, simple. Then came a line that fractured what was left of the Ion Tech illusion. "They told me not to hire more junior engineers from HBCUs. Said it didn't align with the brand image." Gasps. Actual gasps. Marcy's jaw tightened. "We never put that in writing," she muttered. "Exactly," the engineer said. "You didn't have to." From the corner of the crowd, Ava's voice buzzed through Darius's earpiece. "Press pickup confirmed. 3 outlets, Tech Justice, DevWatch, and Logic Loop are now running live blurbs. Expo organizers are monitoring the floor feed. Do you want to speak?" Darius glanced around the circle. People weren't just watching anymore, they were standing, with purpose. Not for the cameras, for each other. "Not yet," he whispered. "Let the room speak first." Marcy took one final shot. "You think walking away from this deal makes you the hero?" she snapped. "You think we won't replace your system?" Darius stepped forward. Not fast, not angry, just forward like gravity decided it was time. "I don't build systems to be irreplaceable," he said. "I build them to make people accountable." He nodded toward the blank screen behind her. "And your code just failed every test." She tried again. "We can salvage this." A statement, a sit down. "I'll get my VP of PR." Darius exhaled through his nose. Not a sigh, a release. Then, for the first time that day, he let his voice lift just slightly. "You called security on the founder of the very intelligence that powers your product. You dismissed a silent observer with your loudest bias, and now you want to schedule redemption." He shook his head. "That's not how we debug culture." A voice behind him added, "That's how we delete it." It was the Cairo Tech engineer again, and this time, the room didn't whisper. It clapped, sharp, rhythmic, not polite, not performative. Real. One by one, people who had stayed silent began to clap too. The intern, the sponsor, the speakers, even some of the staff not Ion Tech, but others nearby joined in. Because in that moment, a tech booth stopped being a sales stage and became a reckoning platform. Darius turned slightly and said calmly, "If this is uncomfortable, good. Because comfort is what protected this." And with that, he signaled Eva. Release the statement. From somewhere off-site, a line of truth hit every inbox with power in its header. Neuromind is terminating all relations with Ion Tech effective immediately. We do not power systems that devalue the people behind them. Bias is not a bug. It's a feature, one we refuse to code into our future. And just like that, Tech Expo's most expensive booth, went offline. He doesn't belong here. The words weren't shouted this time. They were whispered, but louder than anything said before. And they came not from a stranger, not from a tech rep, but from someone standing behind the Ion Tech booth. A man in a tailored gray suit, eyes sharp, voice flat. He'd been silent up until now. One of the executives flown in to shake hands, take photos, and sign things with names he hadn't built. He doesn't belong here, he repeated, now louder. This isn't the time or place for this drama. This is a professional space. A few heads turned, some startled, others furious. Marcy didn't stop him. She didn't correct him. She looked down because she agreed. Darius turned, slowly, like a man rotating a mirror back toward its source. Say that again. The man smirked. You're making this about you, about optics, about victimhood. But this expo, it's about technology. And that technology doesn't care about your feelings. It landed like a punch. But Darius didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped forward once more and said clearly, technology reflects its creators, and bias isn't a bug, it's embedded. Just like this moment. He paused, then asked the question that no one saw coming. What do you build? The man blinked. Excuse me, you said I don't belong. So I'm asking, what do you build? Silence. Because he didn't. He signed. He networked. He leaned on legacy and posture. But he had never written a single line of code, never mapped a neural flow, never touched the machine without needing someone to explain it to him. Someone in the crowd whispered, that's what they fear, that he does build. Another added, and that he doesn't need their permission to do it. Darius turned back to the screen behind him. Still black, still silent. This booth was powered by Neuromind. It no longer is. He looked to the crowd, then to the press standing just outside the circle, phones raised. Mix pointed like satellites waiting for signal. And the irony, he said, they were showcasing AI designed to detect implicit bias while performing it live. Scattered laughter. Dry, disbelieving. The executive in the gray suit stepped forward again, angling himself like he still had control. You think you can embarrass us here and walk away clean? He sneered. You're done. No investor will touch this kind of noise. Darius's response was quiet. I don't build for investors who fund silence. He turned slightly to Annika. What happens to code when it's built in fear? She blinked, then answered, clear. It fails silently. Until it doesn't. The crowd reacted not with noise, but with weight. That pause when everyone knows the shift has occurred. That breath before systems start breaking from within. Then Ava's voice returned in Darius's ear. Coverage has spiked. LinkedIn trending. TechCrunch requesting statement. Board members from the partner firms just like the live video want me to engage. Darius didn't hesitate. No, let them watch. Marcy finally stepped forward again. Her voice, cracked but controlled. This is irreparable, isn't it? Darius turned to her. No, this is documented. And that's more permanent than any apology. Then from the edge of the room, a tall woman in a crimson dress raised her voice. We've worked with Neuromind for 2 years, never seen bias in their protocols. But we've seen it here, repeatedly. She was a senior lead at Cyberlink, another major AI firm. She continued, I want it on record that our next deployment will not include IonTech middleware. We will only license platforms that mirror our values. A wave of realization passed over the IonTech team. This wasn't just a peer nightmare. This was a contract collapse. Then the crowd parted. A member of the Tech Expo committee stepped forward, clipboard, headset. Polished panic barely hidden behind professionalism. Mr. King, she said, voice tight but respectful. Would you be open to a private debrief in the executive suite? Darius looked at her. I've been debriefed by this entire room. That's more than enough. He turned back to the crowd. This is what happens when access replaces merit. When presence is policed instead of potential being respected. Then he said the line that would travel far beyond the expo. You don't have to belong to spaces that were never built for you. You just have to own the system they fear. And with that, the man they mistook for security walked straight through their firewall of power. and rewrote its permissions. The air in the booth was no longer heavy, it was volatile. Not with anger, with clarity. IonTech had been exposed. The crowd had spoken. And now, it was Darius's turn to act, not react. He tapped his earpiece once. Eva. Yes, Mr. King. His voice was quiet, controlled. But behind it, an avalanche waited. Initiate full system override. Tier 1 disengagement. Revoke IonTech's access to all Neuromind systems cloud, APIS, testing nodes. Mark it permanent. A pause. Then Eva answered, calm as always. Authorization confirmed. All credentials severed. They are officially locked out. At that very moment, behind the IonTech booth, every demo screen flickered then faded to black. One by one, like dominoes folding inward. Touch display stopped responding. Voice prompts ceased mid-sentence. The main dashboard console blinked red. Access denied, Neuromind backbone unlinked. Gasps rippled through the expo. A technician from IonTech scrambled toward the back-end console, typing frantically. What the hell? We just lost all our neural sync points. Marcy spun toward him. Restore them now. He shook his head, pale. We can't. The server handshake's been revoked at the root. It's like we don't exist to the system anymore. Darius turned to her. You don't. The crowd murmured. People leaned closer. You were given access to Neuromind's intelligence. But intelligence is not your property. It has standards. He stepped closer to the center of the booth, stood beneath the now blank IonTech banner, and raised his voice for the first time that day, just enough to carry. As of now, IonTech is no longer authorized to run, display, or modify any Neuromind-driven interface or back-end system. Any attempts to relaunch will be considered breach of contract and reported to federal compliance regulators. Someone in the audience clapped, not out of showmanship, out of relief. Then another joined, and another. Marcy stepped forward, voice cracking now. Darius, be reasonable. You're destroying a $12 million collaboration. No. He cut in. You did that the moment your team chose performance over partnership, bias over basic respect. This isn't sabotage. This is self-inflicted collapse. Behind him, one of the IonTech engineers quietly unplugged a display, defeated. No one told him to. Then came the final blow. Darius tapped his earpiece once more. Eva, log all interactions at this booth under disciplinary protocol. Send the full audit trail to our General Counsel and Compliance Archive. CC, Neuromind Board, TechWatch Ethics Committee, and press affiliates. Eva's reply was surgical. Audit initiated. All footage and voice logs from Booth 3-1 to be tagged and transmitted. Confirmation to Council in 321. Darius turned to the crowd one last time. Let this serve as precedent. Partnerships built on silence and status will not survive scrutiny. Not in this era. Not under my systems. A beat past. You don't get to access our intelligence if you can't honor our humanity. Across the aisle, the senior engineer from Cyberlink raised her voice. Cyberlink supports Neuromind's decision. We're severing exploratory talks with IonTech as of today. A man from Horizon I followed. Same here. Effective immediately. Marcy staggered slightly, her empire collapsing in real time. And Darius. He didn't raise his fists. He didn't yell. He just stood there, the eye of a storm he never wanted but knew how to command. And as the last screen faded, and IonTech's presence blinked out like a broken link, Darius whispered to no one in particular. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it revokes access. That's when someone in the back gasped, "Wait, is that him?" And just like that, "Wait, is that him?" The whisper echoed from the back row like an unlocked truth, finally released. The kind of realization that shifts gravity in a room. All eyes turned to Darius. Not the tall black man mistaken for security. Not the silent observer. But the one who had just pulled the plug on a $12 million deal. A corporate giant's illusion. And an entire culture of unchecked arrogance. Now, the room wanted to know. Darius didn't move quickly. He didn't perform. He reached into his back pocket, pulled out a black leather wallet, unfolded it slowly, deliberately. No dramatics, just precision. Inside, a single ID card. No logo, no brand pageantry, just white space and the clean lines of gold text. Darius King, founder and chief architect, Neuromind Systems. He held it up, just high enough for the camera lenses to catch, just long enough for silence to confirm it. A ripple moved through the crowd, not noise, not applause, just realignment. As if the room had finally caught up with the truth it had been standing around the entire time. Marcy froze, her mouth parted slightly, as if forming a new excuse. But no words came, because what do you say when the man you tried to erase reveals he wrote the operating system you depend on? Darius spoke again, low, but sharper now, the kind of voice that doesn't rise, but carries. You asked who I was. Some of you assumed. Some of you pretended not to know. Some of you didn't even look. He paused. So let me answer clearly. He stepped forward just one step. I'm the system. It wasn't a metaphor. It wasn't a clapback. It was reality. The algorithm they demoed is the interface running behind the touch panels, is the predictive model they showcased to investors yesterday, trained on Neuromind's architecture, licensed, barely acknowledged, and now withdrawn. Someone in the crowd whispered. They didn't just disrespect a guest. They disrespected their own infrastructure. Someone else added, and he just walked in, disconnected it, and walked them out. The lead wall behind the booth rebooted. This time, not into IonTech branding, but into a black screen with golden serif font. Systems are reflections. What you build mirrors who you are. Below it, Neuromind protocol active, unauthorized access terminated. Darius turned to Annika, the intern, who spoke up. You recognized the word before the name. She nodded. It had your rhythm. He smiled barely. Always trust the rhythm. Then, from the far left of the crowd, the DevWatch journalist stepped forward. Phone still recording, voice measured. Mr. King, do you have a statement for the press? Darius turned to the camera just for a moment. Bias is not a malfunction. It's a pattern, and patterns don't change by accident. A beat. Today wasn't a disruption. It was a diagnostic. At the rear of the crowd, the IonTech rep in the gray suit tried to slip away. Too late. One attendee shouted, "Tell that to your next pitch deck." Another, "You just lost the best mind in the building." And he wasn't even trying to sell. Darius didn't flinch. He looked to the horizon of the expo, the next wave of booths, ideas. Young builders watching from the edge. Let this moment echo. You don't need validation from broken systems. You need to build ones they can't deny. Then he tapped his earpiece one last time. Eva, we're done here. Her voice came back like a closing door. Exit protocol confirmed. Booth 3-1 to be logged. Statement archived. All systems clean. And with that, the man mistaken for help became the standard for leadership. He didn't shout. He didn't plead. He didn't threaten. He just revoked access and revealed the truth. Not only was he the system, he was what the system should have been. The moment Darius walked away from the IonTech booth, the room didn't return to normal. Because it couldn't. A silence clung to the air like ash after a fire, not destructive, but revealing. The dust hadn't settled. It had exposed. And now, those who laughed, those who dismissed, those who judged based on a shirt instead of a signature, they stood in the debris of their own arrogance. Marcy still hadn't moved. She stared at the rebooted screen, where Neuromind's logo hovered like a sentence unfinished. Her hands, once so practiced at shaking others, now trembled at her sides. The gray-suited exec who'd said he doesn't belong here was gone, left without a word, without even taking his name tag. And the younger IonTech rep, the one who called Darius freelance and smirked in his face. He stood with his arms crossed tight, jaw clenched, eyes darting, not looking for Darius anymore, looking for exits. In contrast, the crowd stayed, not to gawk, to witness, because something had happened here, something unspoken but felt. The energy had shifted, not in volume, in vibration. People weren't just watching a downfall, they were watching accountability. Across the booth, the Cyberlink executive, the one in crimson, made a call on her headset. I want our neuromind contract escalated to priority. We're finalizing with them, not Iontech. She didn't whisper, because when truth arrives in silence, you say it out loud. Marcy tried, one last time, to regain footing. She approached the neuromind engineer who had previously spoken up, the black woman who'd taken off her lanyard. Listen, I know things got out of hand, but if we realign our internal PR. The woman held up a hand. You used me to decorate your diversity reports. Marcy blinked. What? You used my photo in your internal deck last month? Called me a pillar of representation. But you didn't listen when I reported bias. You didn't act when I brought up concerns. You smiled in meetings and iced me out in execution. A beat. You don't get to circle back now. I'm not a campaign. I'm a system too. And with that, she turned her back and walked. Nearby, Annika stood, still holding her clipboard. But now she looked different. Not just bolder, clearer. A woman from another startup approached her. You're the intern who spoke up, right? Annika nodded. You've got a job with us after this, if you want it. Annika blinked. Seriously? People who see early and speak clearly. That's what we build from. They exchange a card, a handshake, a connection that was earned, not managed. The Expo staff, once flustered and distant, now stood nearby. One of them leaned into his mic. Should we notify upper admin about booth 312? A pause. No, came the reply. Booth 312 isn't the problem anymore. It's the proof. Behind the remnants of Iontech's display, a final notification popped on their central console. Neuromind contract terminated. Status irreversible. Reason cultural breach. Response required none. And that, perhaps, was the cruelest closure of all. There would be no meeting, no negotiation, no second chance, just exclusion. The kind they thought they had the right to impose on others. Now flipped, now final. A voice from the hallway near the exit, a young man live streaming, summed it up best. They called him a threat, and he became one. Not to safety, but to the system they never thought they'd have to answer to. Somewhere in the distance, applause erupted again. But it wasn't near Iontech. It came from a different booth, one where Neuromind's logo had just been uploaded, live. Not a rebrand, a realignment. And so, the ones who thought they owned the floor now stood on ground that no longer answered to them. The system had spoken, and it didn't need their approval anymore. The fallout wasn't loud. It didn't come with sirens or broken glass. It came with notifications. One by one, the Iontech team received them, their phones buzzing like a synchronized reckoning. Subject line: termination of access Neuromind systems. Message body: this is an automated notice. All Iontech credentials have been permanently revoked. No reinstatement available. Future requests will be logged but not answered. This action is final. A junior analyst stared at his screen, slack-jawed. I can't even access our internal dashboards. Neuromind cut us off from our own reporting tools. Marcy snatched her phone from her bag, swiped furiously. This has to be a mistake. He can't just... He already did. It was the voice of the Neuromind engineer, calm, but with the steel of someone who's been quiet too long. You thought he was just a vendor, a contract, but Darius is the backbone, and now he's gone. The young Iontech rep muttered under his breath, "We'll rebuild. We've got the specs." A snort of disbelief came from an adjacent booth. You don't even understand the specs. You white-labeled a platform you didn't respect, and now you're locked out of your own launch. Meanwhile, across the expo, investors were already moving. Not one, not two. 5 firms posted public statements within 20 minutes. We support Neuromind's decision to cut ties with Iontech. Inclusion isn't branding, it's infrastructure. At the Iontech booth, equipment was being unplugged, but not by staff, by expo operations. A short woman in a headset clipboard firm, voice firmer. Per Expo Code 47, once a digital breach or ethics violation is confirmed, partner tech must be dismantled immediately. She looked at Marcy with professional detachment. You've been flagged. Booth 31 to be is no longer authorized for display. Someone tried to argue, but we've paid. Not with integrity. It wasn't just about Darius anymore. It was about precedent. Annika, standing just outside the crowd, whispered to the neuromind engineer, "How does he stay so calm through all this?" The woman smiled, quiet and proud, because he's seen the pattern, and now he controls the code. The LED display on the booth's front wall, now unplugged, flickered one last time before blacking out. Not with a crash, but with a message. System revoked due to violation of alignment. Power is not permanent, it's permitted, and permission can be withdrawn. From the far end of the floor, the Tech Expo director, silver-haired, press suit, made his way to the epicenter. He didn't greet Iontech. He looked for Darius. He found him near the elevators, standing with Eva on a split-screen tablet and a quiet air of finality. The director offered his hand. "Mr. King, on behalf of the Expo, I'd like to issue a formal apology." Darius shook it once, firmly. "Your apology doesn't need to be formal, just effective." The director nodded. "The Expo floor is yours next year. Any format, any message. You set the standard." Darius didn't blink. "I already did." Back inside the booth, the Iontech team began disassembling what remained, not just tech, but identity. No screens, no pitch decks, no leverage, just silence, and the sound of relevance being unplugged. Darius turned to Annika as he prepared to leave. "You staying?" She looked back at the booth, then forward. "No." He smiled. "Good. Systems change when the next line of code doesn't accept the previous bug." She nodded. "You just debugged the whole building." And with that, Iontech wasn't just shut down. They were shut out. Not by noise, not by violence, but by design, by quiet precision, by a man they tried to mistake and couldn't control. Justice hadn't shouted. It had simply logged in, executed the command, and walked away. The floor of the Tech Expo returned to motion. Not noise, not chaos. Motion. Like the first waves after a storm, cautious, recalibrated. Booth 3-1 to be, once the centerpiece of Iontech's dominance, now stood empty. No screens, no banners, just cords curled like consequences and a table stripped of purpose. But even in its silence, the booth spoke louder than anything else on the floor. It said, "Power unearned is always temporary." Darius King didn't linger. He never did. He walked down the long hallway past the exhibition space, quiet, shoulders steady, no cameras following, no music swelling, just footsteps, measured, clear. Behind him, ripple effects took form. 3 startups adjusted their partnership roadmaps with Neuromind now top priority. The Expo's internal policy team began drafting a new bias reporting protocol, unofficially called King's Clause. And a dozen young interns exchanged contact cards, not for networking, but for alignment. Ava's voice chimed in his earpiece as he neared the executive exit. All media coverage positive. No rebuttals from Iontech. Their leadership has gone quiet. A pause. You just redefine how justice is done in public without ever raising your voice. Darius didn't respond immediately. He just looked out the tall glass panel near the exit. City skyline. Sky like a clean slate. Then he said, "We're not here to shout. We're here to show." He stepped outside into the sunlight. A breeze lifted the collar of his jacket. The air felt different. Or maybe it was the weight. He decided not to carry anymore the burden of asking to be seen. Because today, he wasn't just seen. He was witnessed. Across the city, on live streams and conference group chats, one line kept surfacing. He didn't yell. He didn't plead. He just ended the deal and walked away. And under it, fecking protocol. Annika stood near the window, watching him disappear into the crowd. She wasn't crying, but her breath hitched, because something in her shifted. Not just ambition. Alignment. What she saw today wasn't just a tech leader. It was a blueprint of what power could look like when it wasn't loud, but undeniable. In her notebook later that night, she wrote, "He made silence feel like strategy. He made dignity look like data. He didn't have to dominate. He just had to disconnect." Back at the expo, someone placed a placard on the table of the now empty booth. Black background, gold letters, This space has been reclaimed. Not by volume, by vision. And that's how the day ended. Not with a mic drop, not with applause, but with understanding that justice doesn't need an audience. It just needs one man, unshaken, unmoved, unmistaken, to show up and log out.